Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
We registrado Betelgeuse.
On Freemasonry by Pope Leo XIII. The title of the encyclical is
Humanum Genus.
Yes, and that's always taken from the
First words of the encyclical.
yes, and if you look at the first words of this encyclical in English, it says
The race of man.
yes, so that's Humanum Genus, the race of man. Top of page 10. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor a bad tree produce good fruit. Now the Masonic sect produces fruits that are pernicious and of the bitterest savor. For from what we have above most clearly shown, that which is their ultimate purpose forces itself into view. Namely, what is their ultimate purpose? It is the
Utter overthrow of all that religious and political order of the world, which the Christian teaching has produced.
yes, overthrow the church, overthrow the state. And the
substitution of the new state of things in accordance with their ideas, of which the foundations and laws shall be drawn from mere naturalism.
yeah, there's that sin of naturalism again, right? So, as Bishop Williamson said many, many years ago in his golden era, the devil's goal is dissolve et coagula. Dissolve et coagula, which means, anybody?
Dissolve and
You get an English word here, coagulate. The blood can coagulate. So dissolve and put back together again.
oh, I see.
Dissolve and put back together again. So that's what the goal of Freemasonry was. Dissolve the ages of the faith, the High Middle Ages. Dissolve them with a whole series of revolutions down to World War I and World War II, and their hope is to have a World War III to establish a new reign, a new order, from the reign of Christ the King to the reign of Satan with the Antichrist. So the reign of Christ to the reign of Antichrist. Dissolve the ages of the faith, dissolve Christendom, dissolve the Catholic Church as much as they possibly can, but they won't succeed, and then put everything back together again under the Antichrist. So it took 400 years to do this. 500 years from the end of the Middle Ages with the Protestant Revolution in 1517, the Freemasonic Revolution in 1717, the Communist Revolution in 1917, and then fast forwarding as much as they can to bring in the reign of the Antichrist is World War I, which destroyed the last of the Catholic monarchies. World War II, which spread democracy everywhere, the new political system without Christ the King, and give Israel its state in 1948, which Pius X did not support. And then, and now, under Trump, people don't know this, that Trump moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the U.S. Embassy and the center of Israel, where they hope to rebuild the temple and rebegin the red cow Old Testament sacrifices. And all this to prepare for the Antichrist. That's what the goal is. So dissolve and put back together again. Dissolve et coagula. Say it in Latin, everyone.
Dissolve et coagula.
Yes. What we have said and are about to say, paragraph 11, must be understood of the sect of the Freemasons taken generically, and insofar as it comprises the associations kindred to it and confederated with it, but not of the individual members of them. So he's talking here about Oddfellows, Rotary Club, Moose Lodge. What other ones are there? Shriners. These are the masks of Freemasonry that do the good works. You know, hospitals and fundraisers for good purposes. No, Illuminati is the high-ups. They're not the masks. They're the engine.
And also the Carbonati.
Yeah, in Italy. Yes. And the B'nai B'rith in the U.S. So those are the high-ranking. Among them would be the ones that speak with Lucifer. There may be persons among these, and not a few, who, although not free from the guilt of having entangled themselves in such associations, yet are neither themselves partners in their criminal acts, nor aware of the ultimate objects which they are endeavoring to attain. So these are the useful idiots, right? In the same way, some of the affiliated societies perhaps by no means approve of the extreme conclusions which they would, if consistent, embrace as necessarily following from their common principles, did not their very foulness strike them with horror. Read on, Gavril. Some of these, again,
are led by circumstances of times and places, either to aim at smaller things than the others usually attempt, or than themselves they would wish to attempt. They are not, however, for this reason to be reckoned as alien to the Masonic Federation. For the Masonic Federation is to be judged not so much by the things which it has done or brought to completion, as by the sum of its pronounced opinions.
Paragraph 12.
Now the fundamental doctrine of the naturalists, which they sufficiently make known by their name, is the human nature and human reason in all things to be mistress, and ought in all things to be mistress and guide.
Yes, so stop there for a minute. So the doctrine of the naturalists is that human nature without grace and human reason without the light of faith is sufficient to itself. So this is that Luciferian naturalism, right? That Luciferian pride. I don't need God's grace. But our Lord says, Sine me nihil potestis facere. Without me, you can do nothing, even at the natural level. Right now, who's keeping our heart pumping? If he didn't, we'd just drop dead instantly. So even on the natural level, we depend on God. So it's the utter blindness, really. You know, the very ones who were scourging our Lord, crowning him with thorns, mocking him, punching him, spitting on him. If our Lord didn't hold them in existence, they couldn't do that to him. So he was the one giving them life, keeping their heart pumping, keeping their lungs going, keeping their blood flowing, keeping their soul in their body while they were beating on him and whipping him and crucifying him. And it's the same with all of us when we sin. It's our Lord who keeps us in existence. So he gives us all these good things, and we often use it to offend him. But even on the natural level, we couldn't exist without his holding us by his conservative power, keeping us in existence. Read on.
Laying this down, they care little for duties to God, or pervert them by erroneous and vague opinions, for they deny that anything has been taught by God. They allow no dogma of religion or truth taught by God, or truth which cannot be understood by the human intelligence. nor any teacher who ought to be believed by reason of his authority. And since it is a special and exclusive duty of the Catholic Church fully to set forth in words truths divinely received, to teach beside other divine helps to salvation, the authority of its office, and to defend the same with perfect purity, it is against the Church that the rage and attack of the enemies are principally directed.
So what's their big target? What's their main goal?
Destroy the church.
Destroy the Catholic Church. And in the 1800s, it probably looked impossible. Because you had a good Pope, Pius IX, and then Leo XIII, and then Pius X. They probably thought, how in the world are we going to destroy this thing? But then they were already working under Leo XIII in the seminaries, introducing what? That Pius X will condemn in 65 propositions.
The monist ideas.
Yes. And then after Pius X died, the snakes were pounded back in their holes, but then they came out again. And then they began to infiltrate the seminaries, so that by Vatican II you had a whole bunch of modernist liberal bishops who were ready for Vatican II, ready for the revolution. So right now, Archbishop Vigano recently put out a letter giving names that Cardinal Supich of Chicago, Gregory of Washington, D.C., and McCarrick, and he even delved into the past with Bernardine of Chicago, and the one out in Seattle, what was his name? All these rotten bishops and cardinals, they were formed all part of an overthrow of the Catholic Church. They were the bad guys, and Pope Francis backs them up. So he is backing up the total revolution within the Church. So they want to destroy the Catholic Church. They had to change the Mass, change the sacraments, change the teaching, bring in ecumenism. And they're doing a darn good job trying to destroy the Church. They have a pope according to their wishes, 5 of them. But to their dismay, they're not going to succeed. They're not going to succeed because the faith will carry on. In little families, little oratories, little traditional families all over the world preserving the faith. So they won't succeed, but they are trying to do a good job to destroy it. 13, Guadalupe.
In those matters which regard religion, let it be seen how the sect of the Freemasons act, especially where it is more free to act without restraint. And then let anyone judge whether in fact it does not wish to carry out the policy of the naturalists. But by a long and persevering labor, they endeavor to bring about this result, namely, that the office and authority of the Church may become of no account in the civil state. And for this same reason, they declare to the people and contend that the Church and state ought to be altogether disunited.
So whose principle is separation of church and state? Whose principle is that?
The naturalists.
The naturalists and the
Freemasons.
Freemasons. If any Catholic believes in separation of church and state, he is a Mason. He's a Catholic with a Masonic apron. And a lot of people are. And they don't know because they've just been raised in it. But it needs to be said, and said loud and clear. Separation of church and state is a principle condemned by the Church, condemned by common sense. Go on.
By this means, they reject from the laws and from the commonwealth the wholesome influence of the Catholic religion, and they consequently imagine that states ought to be constituted without any regard for the laws and precepts of the Church.
Yes. So, godless, atheistic states, as Archbishop Lefebvre said, Vatican II, by religious liberty, uncrowned Christ the King and wanted atheistic states, like a new Babylon of all beliefs. And this is the apostasy, the public apostasy of the Catholic nations, foretold by St. Paul. So we are truly living that era of the apostasy of the Catholic nations, which has to happen before the Antichrist. All right, and then part of the infiltration in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, and especially the 50s and 60s, they let in the good men who prayed the rosary, the good men who had the level heads and were manly and wanted to be good priests. They were dismissed. And they kept in the seminaries these limp-wristed, wilting flowers and perverts, so that by the time they were ordained and bishops, they would try to implode the Catholic Church from within because of all the scandals, pedophilia and all that disgusting stuff. So look at the disgrace, look at the humiliation that has been brought on to the Catholic Church by these men that were permitted to be and stay in the seminaries when they were perverts and would not change and would not abandon their sin and so forth. So they're trying, according to the media, they're happy. The media is happy to rake all this up. And with all the scandals, and it really is a scandal, it truly is. But the Pope, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Francis, they didn't clean it out. They left these perverts in place. They let them work as bishops. So it never was cleaned out yet. Right? So, frightening, very frightening. Same in the tradition has not been spared this scandal either. In our dear SSPX, there's been a small handful of these scandals, and it truly harms the good of the souls, the good of the church, the good of faith. It really is harmful. And superiors, once they know this is going on, they have to yank such and such a priest or seminarian or whoever out. They have to yank them out. And if they're priests, they cannot anymore be put out on the mass circuits. They just have to be taken off mass circuits. So, yes. 14. Gavril?
Nor do they think it enough to disregard the church, the best of guides, unless they also injure it by their hostility. Indeed, with them it is lawful to attack with impunity the very foundations of the Catholic religion, in speech, in writing, and in teaching. And even the rights of the church are not spared, and the offices with which it is divinely invested are not safe.
So St. John Bosco, he himself battled the attacks of the Masons against the Catholic Church. And they were spreading rumors. The Catholic Church is just all about money. The Catholic Church is just all about power. And St. John Bosco would put out pamphlets. Same with St. Anthony Mary Claret. They put out pamphlets defending Catholic doctrine, defending the Catholic Church, defending the Catholic teaching against the attacks of the Freemasons. So now they can attack the church. It's pretty easy to attack it now because we have such a rotten pope, rotten bishops, rotten clergy, scandals. It's easy to attack. And those of weak faith, they lose the faith. So, yes, we have to work to bring back the Catholic faith, the Catholic Mass, the Catholic sacraments, the Catholic teaching, which is the only path of true prosperity and freedom, really. All right, go on. The least possible liberty. the least possible liberty to manage affairs is left to the church. And this is done by laws not apparently very hostile, but in reality framed and fitted to hinder freedom of action. So they pass all these laws that cripple the work of the church. Such as in Italy, in the time of St. John Bosco, they passed a law that closed down contemplative orders. A very satanic, Masonic law to shut down the contemplative orders and persecute them, or overtax them, or forbid them to have their own property. By setting up all these laws, they cripple the action of the church. Moreover, read on.
Moreover, we see exceptional and onerous laws imposed upon the clergy to the end that they may be continually diminished in number and in necessary means. We see also the remnants of the possessions of the church fettered by the strictest conditions and subjected to the power and arbitrary will of the administrators of the state, and the religious orders rooted up and scattered.
Yes, so they always go for the spine of the church, which is the religious orders, to shut them down if they can. So in the French Revolution, they attacked the monasteries and convents. In the Protestant Revolution, they attacked the seminary, monasteries and convents. And in Mexico, President Calles, he passed a law expelling all the contemplative orders. Benedictines, Carmelites, Poor Clares, they were all kicked out of Mexico. A horrible crime. So a lot of them came up to the U.S. And one of them I was telling you about, Mother Marie Elias of the Blessed Sacrament. She was the one that told St. Teresa, if you get us out of this one, I'll build you a convent. And she did build that convent in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We visited it on one of the boys' trips. And we wanted to pray at her tomb, but the sisters wouldn't let us into the tomb, but they let us into the chapel. And the Mother Superior said, why do you want to see her anyway? As if they forgot, the treasure they had of Mother Mary Elias of the Blessed Sacrament. And she said something like, those fables about her, they were downplaying all the miracles she did. So they were brought in Mexico to the executioner squad. I told you this, right? And they were shot. And 2 hours later they woke up, her and another nun. And they had bullet holes through their clothing, but they were alive. So St. Teresa worked a miracle, spared them, and she did build that convent as she promised up in Grand Rapids. And then another miracle that happened, she was on the train, she was holding a dear statue of the baby Jesus, the bambino, in her arms, wrapped up, as if she was holding a real baby. And then they had to go in disguise, because they were dressed as, housewives. And with another nun, they were traveling on the train, and one of the federales noticed the baby in her arms was very quiet. So he walked up to her and said, what are you holding in your arms? Because all religious statues were forbidden. And at that very moment, the baby Jesus, the statue, came to life. And he started kicking, moving his arms, and making little baby sounds. So they left her alone. So she had a lot of little miracles like this. So what a horrible thing to expel the contemplative orders. But the devil knows the power of monasteries and convents. That's why he's, they don't do anything to anybody. They just live in prayer and penance. Why come after them? Why shut them down? They don't harm anybody. But that was the argument of the Masonic Revolution, is they don't do anything good to help society. They don't teach, they don't do medical work, they don't do anything to build the economy, so they're useless. So, but what could be more useful for society than an army of men and women given to prayer and penance? That's the most useful thing for society. And the Virgin Mary told Mother Mariana, if you knew how many hurricanes, earthquakes, fires, tornadoes, and natural disasters are prevented by the prayers of the monasteries, you would want them in all your land. We would want a monastery in every state of the U.S., monasteries and convents. So yes, root up the religious order and scatter them. That was the goal of the Masons. And they did a lot of this in the 1800s. In Spain, Italy, and other countries in South America. 15, read on, Guadalupe.
But against the Apostolic See and the Roman Pontiff, the contention of these enemies has been for a long time directed. The Pontiff was first, for
Specious.
specious reasons, thrust out from the bulwark of his liberty and of his rights, the civil Christendom.
Princedom.
Princedom.
So in other words, they stole the papal states.
And here he's alluding to when Pius IX was forced into exile.
That's right. Pius IX had to flee for his life in an oversized cassock, an oversized hat, and oversized glasses. That's how he had to flee. And they stole the papal states. I mean, pretty much all the center of Italy was papal states. Meaning that for centuries, people, when they died, they said, I want to give my land to the church, to the Pope. And they could do that. It's respecting their will. But the Masons stole that property. So now all that's left is the little Vatican City. Stolen. No outcry. No cry of crimes against humanity and injustice. The Catholic Church always suffers these attacks. Always. So here they're saying they want to attack the papacy. So they did try, but they realized you can't get rid of the papacy. So then they tried another angle, which was, if we can't have a pope who was a Freemason, let's have a pope that promotes
Our Freemasonic ideas.
Absolutely. And Archbishop Lefebvre has a chapter of that at the Alta Vendita in his book, They Have Uncrowned Him. So, and now they've had 5 popes of their desire. Starting with John the 23rd, Pope Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict the 15th, now 16th, sorry, yeah, thank you. And now Pope Francis, who's on his deathbed. If we get another bad pope, well, the battle just goes on. If it does, if God permits this, he will probably be very, very cooperative with the New World Order. And I could see a bad pope in approving the Noahide laws worldwide as a whole, free the Jews type of thing. And I could see that happening. And then an open persecution on traditional Catholics. That could very well happen. Or, if we get a good pope, finally, then he'll be heavily persecuted. Unless God, which is supposed to happen, a terrible chastisement on all of Europe and the world. So after that chastisement, or 3 days of darkness, whatever form it will take, men will be ready to come back to God. They have seen enough death, they've seen enough disease, seen enough sickness, seen enough misery to turn back to God. So attack the papacy. So yes, soon he was unjustly driven into a condition which was unbearable because of the difficulties raised on all sides. And now the time has come when the partisans of the sects openly declared what in secret among themselves they have for a long time plotted, that the sacred power of the pontiffs must be,
Abolished.
yes, crush the power of the Pope and his influence, and that the pontificate itself, founded by divine right, must be,
Utterly destroyed.
yes, destroy the papacy. Destroy the papacy. So they're not dumb. They knew our Lord set up a pretty powerful castle of the Catholic Church. So it took them a long time to destroy it, but here they are. But they won't succeed even. Okay, read on. If other proofs
were wanted, this pact would be sufficiently disclosed by the testimony of men well informed, of whom some at other times, and again others recently, have declared it to be true of the Freemasons, that they especially desire to assail the Church with irreconcilable hostility, and that they will never rest until they have destroyed whatever the Supreme Pontiffs have established for the sake of religion.
Yes, so that's the true face of the Freemasons at the higher levels for sure. And it looks like Trump is a Mason. He was in their ceremonies, honored with his apron, so, you can't trust that at all. At all. And I think all presidents of the United States have had to be Freemasons. You cannot get that high without being a member of the lodge. So they have to vow at some point to work to destroy the Catholic Church. 16, Gabriel.
Those who are admitted as members are not commanded to abjure by any form of words the Catholic doctrines. This omission, so far from being adverse to the designs of the Freemasons, is more useful for their purposes. First, in this way they easily deceive the simple-minded and the heedless, and can induce a far greater number to become members. Again, as all who offer themselves are received, whatever may be their form of religion, they thereby teach the great error of this age, that a regard for religion should be held as an indifferent matter, and that all religions are alike. This manner of reasoning is calculated to bring about the ruin of all forms of religion, and especially of the Catholic religion, which, as it is the only one that is true, cannot without great injustice be regarded as merely equal to other religions.
Yes. So if one says all religions are the same, all religions are equal, and all religions contradict themselves, they all contradict each other, they're self-contradicting, then the obvious conclusion is, therefore, all religion,
It's all just a joke.
it's all false. Yeah, it's all a joke. It's all for old ladies and little kids. And that's what Pope Leo XIII says elsewhere. The freedom of all religions actually leads to atheism. The freedom of all beliefs leads to no belief at all. And what they don't see is that is a religion. To hold that there is no religion, no true religion, is a religion. And that's the religion of the United States. It's very Jewish, it's Judaic, because they reject the true God, the true Messiah. And that's who runs the U.S. government. And it's open. They're defending Israel right now and supporting them in a work of genocide. So it boils down to, if it is a religion, that all religions are useless. And the only counter to that is the true religion. So we must profess the true religions, preach the true religion, spread the true religion, live the true religion. And all this under our Blessed Mother. All right, 16. 17. Go ahead, Guadalupe.
But the naturalists go much further, for having in the highest things entered upon a wholly erroneous course, they are carried headlong to extremes, either by reason of the weakness of human nature, or because God inflicts upon them the just punishment of their pride. Hence it happens that they no longer consider as certain and permanent those things which are fully understood by the natural light of reason, such as certainly are the existence of God, the immaterial nature of the human soul, and its immortality. The sect of the Freemasons, by similar course of error, is exposed to these same dangers. For although in a general way they may profess the existence of God, they themselves are witnesses that they do not at all maintain this truth with the full assent of the mind or with a firm conviction. Neither do they conceal that this question about God is the greatest source and cause of discourse among them. In fact, it is certain that a considerable contention about this same subject has existed among them very lately. But indeed the sect allows great liberty to its votaries, so that to each side is given the right to defend its own opinion, either that there is a God, or that there is none. And those who obstinately contend that there is no God are as easily initiated as those who contend that God exists, though, like the pantheists, they have false notions concerning him. All which is nothing else than taking away the reality, or retaining some absurd representation of the divine nature.
Yeah, so in their lodges they accept all beliefs, all religions, whether you believe in God or not. So that itself condemns the whole system. And they make a mockery of God. But if you're Catholic and you're nice and you have your Catholic idea of God, well, fine, you can be a Freemason. If you're a Mormon and you have your idea of God, fine, you can be a Freemason. So Masonry pretends to be a mimic of the Universal Church. The Universal Church is all men who believe the same doctrine. And the devil's ape is Freemasonry, which all men are united, but in the belief that there is no true religion. So it's a mimic of the true Universal Catholic Church. Okay, we'll stop there. Agitonium nostrum in nomine Domini.